The sun drops, the temperature falls with it. And somewhere out there in the dark, something with teeth is already moving. Today, night means dimming a light switch, scrolling for an hour, and passing out under a blanket behind a locked door with an alarm, quietly watching the perimeter. Night for you is boring. Night is nothing. Now rewind 100,000 years. Same sunset, same drop in temperature. But there's no lock, no wall, no app pinging you if something moves outside. Just a fire, a huddle of bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder, and total darkness pressing in from every direction. Darkness that might be hiding a leopard, a hyena, or a rival group of humans who do not wish you well. So what did they actually do for roughly 12 hours a night, every single night for hundreds of thousands of years straight? Because they just slept isn't the answer. It's not even close. For roughly 300,000 years, night was the single most dangerous, most exposed stretch of every human day. Compare that to now. The average American spends nearly 7 hours a night fully unconscious behind a locked door in climate-controlled silence, with zero predators within 100 miles. Our ancestors got none of that peace, and yet night wasn't just endured. It quietly became one of the most important chapters in the entire human story. Let's start with the one thing that made any of this survivable at all: fire. Archaeologist Francesco Berna and his team, publishing research in 2012 on the Wonderwerk Cave site in South Africa, uncovered burned bone and ash deposits dated to roughly 1 million years ago, among the earliest solid evidence anywhere on Earth of early humans controlling fire. 1 million years of a species learning to hold something that could easily kill them, and instead turning it into the only wall standing between them and everything hunting in the dark. Not decoration, not comfort. A weapon that didn't need to be thrown. Second piece of evidence, and this one's about what fire actually did to conversation itself. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner spent extended time with the Jahonsi of the Kalahari Desert, recording their talk across both day and night, and published a striking finding in 2014. Daytime conversation was overwhelmingly practical: logistics, complaints, gossip, economics. But firelit night talk flipped almost entirely. Stories, myth, memory, imagination took over. Same people, same brains, completely different mode of thinking, not by accident, by design. Night was quite literally built for something day never touched. If patterns like this are catching you off guard, this is exactly the kind of thing this channel exists to dig up. So hit subscribe now, because the next piece of evidence is even stranger. Third, sleep itself, and it is genuinely bizarre. Historian A. Roger Eckerch spent over a decade combing through pre-industrial diaries, court records, and medical texts across Europe, publishing his findings in a 2001 paper and later a 2005 book. He found hundreds of casual references to first sleep and second sleep, a segmented sleep pattern where people woke naturally in the dead of night for an hour or more, used that stretch for quiet talk or simply lying awake in the dark, then drifted into a second block of sleep before dawn. Not insomnia, not disorder, a completely normal expected rhythm, one that vanished from human memory within a few generations of artificial light showing up. Fourth piece of evidence pulled straight out of the ground. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologist Christopher Henshelwood and his team uncovered pieces of ochre engraved with deliberate crosshatch patterns, dated to roughly 73,000 years ago, alongside shell beads clearly worked for personal ornamentation. Getting that ochre meant travel, sometimes over real distance, and grinding it into usable pigment took slow, careful time that had to come from somewhere in the daily schedule. Researchers increasingly point to firelit night hours as the most plausible window for this kind of work. Not survival tasks. Identity making, most likely happening after the sun went down. Fifth, the Hadza of Tanzania, one of the last hunter-gatherer societies left on Earth, studied extensively by anthropologist Frank Marlowe. Related sleep research published in Current Biology in 2015 by Gandhi Yetish and colleagues, comparing sleep across 3 modern hunter-gatherer and forager populations, the Hadza, the San, and the Tsimane, shattered a popular assumption instantly. These groups didn't sleep more than industrialized populations. They averaged roughly 6 to 7 hours a night, similar to modern sleepers, and rarely napped. The difference wasn't quantity. It was structure, sleep locked tightly to actual darkness and temperature drop, not to a clock, not to a schedule, not to a phone telling them it was bedtime. Sixth, and this one's about who stays awake while everyone else sleeps. Anthropological observations of group sleeping patterns, including work among groups like the FA of Central Africa, describe something researchers call staggered or segmented night watching, different individuals naturally waking at different points across the night, creating rolling, overlapping windows of alertness across the entire group. Not one exhausted guard standing rigid watch for 8 straight hours. A living, shifting security net, built entirely out of ordinary human sleep cycles layered on top of each other. So let's actually reconstruct what one of these nights looked like moment by moment tens of thousands of years ago. The sun drops fast, faster than you're used to, with nothing stretching the day out even a minute longer. The temperature falls right behind it. This is the first shift of the night, and it starts with the fire. Someone builds it up deliberately now, feeding it thicker wood that will burn slow and long because this fire has to hold until morning. It isn't just warmth. It's the only real barrier between your group and everything hunting out there in the black. Food happens early, close to the flames, while there's still enough light to see what you're eating and enough alertness left to actually enjoy it. This tends to be the loudest, most social meal of the day, full of talk, complaint, and casual argument, echoing the same practical daytime tone Wiesner recorded bleeding into the earliest hours of the evening before the mood shifts. Then, as full darkness settles in completely, something changes in the group. The practical talk, who found what, who owes what, who did something irritating today, starts fatting out. In its place comes something slower: stories. The kind that explain how the world began, why animals act the way they do, why the stars sit exactly where they sit. Nobody is reading these from anything. There's nothing to read from. Every story lives entirely in memory, reshaped slightly with each telling. Depending on who happens to be speaking that particular night, someone works with their hands while they listen, maybe grinding ochre into pigment, maybe shaping a bead, maybe just running fingers over a shell with a hole already carved into it. This kind of slow, careful work needs calm hands and unhurried time, and firelit night, strangely, provides exactly that in a way the busy, urgent daylight hours never quite do. Eventually people start drifting toward sleep, but not all at once and not in one unbroken block. Following the rhythm Eckhart later found buried in written records, and one anthropologist's suspect runs far deeper into human history than any document, a first stretch of sleep begins not long after full dark falls. Somewhere in the deep middle of the night, some members of the group stir, not from danger, not from noise, just naturally. This is quiet time. Low talk, if there's talk at all. Someone checks the fire without needing to be told. Someone shifts at a sound worth noticing, then relaxes because it's nothing. Then a second stretch of sleep carries the group through until the sky starts to lighten again through all of it, and this is the detail that actually matters most: someone is always at least partially awake. Not through rigid, brutal shifts, but through the natural, staggered overlap of many different people's individual sleep cycles running at slightly different times. A rustle in the brush, a shift in wind carrying an unfamiliar smell, a change in the pitch of insect noise that signals something moving nearby. Someone registers it, half-consciously, long before it becomes a threat serious enough to fully wake anyone in a panic. By the time the sun comes back up, the fire has held all night. The stories have been told again with small changes nobody quite noticed happening. Someone's hands finished a task they started hours earlier in the dark, and the entire group is still breathing to see the light return. Before we get to why any of this actually mattered, if this channel's the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe right now, because the next part is the whole reason this video exists. And here's the turn, the part that reframes everything you just walked through. Night wasn't dead time our ancestors were simply forced to grind through until morning arrived. It was a completely separate cognitive and cultural mode from daytime, running on its own distinct rhythm, doing work daylight simply could not do. Wiesner's research among the Jahonsi makes this brutally clear. Daytime was for practical survival tasks, logistics, economics, complaint. Night, lit only by fire, was for imagination, myth, story, and the direct transmission of shared meaning from one generation straight into the next. Strip away the artificial light and endless stimulation we now use to blur the line between day and night completely, and what you're left with is a species that had, quite literally, two separate modes of existing, one built for the physical world, and one built entirely for the symbolic one. This is very possibly where human culture, in the deepest sense of the word, actually took root. Not in the noise and urgency of daylight survival, but in the stillness and enforced closeness of the dark, when there was genuinely nothing left to do except talk, imagine, create, and listen, because there was no other light to work by and nowhere else worth going. The staggered sleep pattern researchers keep finding in modern hunter-gatherer groups suggests something else too. That fear of the dark wasn't purely dread. It was also quietly, deeply cooperative. No single person had to carry the terrifying weight of staying awake alone all night, hyper-alert to every sound in the blackness. The entire group, without ever explicitly planning it, split that burden automatically, through nothing more complicated than the natural, staggered rhythm of ordinary human sleep. You live in a world where night has been almost completely defanged. Streetlights erase the darkness before it can even fully settle in. Locked doors replace fire as your actual line of defense. Screens now fill the exact hours your ancestors once spent staring into flames, listening to stories that explained where the world came from and where it might be going next. But somewhere behind every story you've ever heard, every myth, every piece of folklore handed down to you without you ever knowing exactly where it first came from, is a fire that had to be kept alive by someone in pitch darkness, surrounded by people who took turns without ever fully sleeping and without ever fully waking, keeping each other alive until the sun finally came back. You inherited their stories. You forgot you ever needed their fire.